Welcome to the Market Mystics podcast, where we discuss what's happening in the cryptosphere and trading on earth as it is in heaven. Buckle up and huddle on while we dive in and get weird. Here are your hosts, Joshua and Kim.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Market Mystics Thursday. Kim and I have spent the past 2 hours, maybe, at least hour.
Definitely 2 hours.
Trying to figure out what we're going to talk about. And just talking about other business things. I mean, I know we've talked about it, but Kim and I have a financial business together that you can find at upperroomcd.com. You can book coaching appointments with us. You can learn more about us.
You can buy merch.
You can buy merch there. You can buy Market Mystics merch there. I don't think we actually have any Upper Room merch, so I think it's all Market Mystics.
We might have a sticker.
Okay. Do
maybe.
we? I don't think.
I mean, I bought some, so I think maybe we have them.
Okay, we might have something, but mostly we've just been talking about like what's going on in crypto, what's going on in the world, how does it connect, what do we see patterns there, and what are our thoughts on it. And probably the majority of our thoughts would get us canceled or would get us banned on some platforms.
Maybe audited for the rest of our lives.
Yeah, but
maybe detained. I don't know.
Who knows? But we're still going to share some of those thoughts with you today.
I guess because we'll see what happens.
We're just going to have a conversation. It might get really weird. It might not get weird.
It's true. We really were talking for the last 2 hours, some about business, some about we were praying a bit, and some about just technical things with cameras and stuff. But we had some really great podcast content without ever having started that podcast. So we're like, this is what we should talk about. Except it's never as good the second time. It comes off very canned and like not interesting.
Right. So we'll see how today goes. It might be great. It might not be amazing, but either way, we'll have a conversation. We'll put some content out on the internet. So there'll be something. But before we get into that, let's run through some market updates. So we have Bitcoin is down 1.3% in 24 hours, down 6.7% in 7 days, currently sitting under 19,000, 18,898. We have Ethereum is down 5.3% in 24 hours, down 22.5% in 7 days, currently at 1266. Ethereum has gotten hit hard, and I don't know if it's just because the market really built it up before the merge, or it's probably a combination of things. I know some of the information that the Fed has released about interest rates and their plans have affected all the markets in general, but Ethereum is definitely taking the news harder than Bitcoin has been. We have our top mover in the top 100 coins is Algorand. It trades as ALGO. It's the number 31 coin. It is up 15.7% in 24 hours, up 20% in 7 days, currently trading at 36 cents. Algorand and the Algorand Foundation have a vision for the borderless economy. At its most basic level, this is a digital economy where anything of value can be traded between two or more parties without the friction of the current financial networks.
That sounds right up my alley.
Just reading that, I love it.
Yeah. I know. I'm like, I need to look into this coin, or the company at least, because I like, I don't know if you could call it, I like the ideology behind that.
Yeah. They have some good marketing written up. I don't know. Hopefully that's actually what they believe and are pursuing, but we'll see. And if our conversation that we had before has anything to do with it, it probably means they will soon be experiencing regulation or attacks or hacks or all sorts of stuff.
True.
uh,
Okay. Before we move on, I do want to have an honorable mention for a mover today,
mm,
and that's XRP, whom we've talked about on and off again. They've been caught up in this big suit with the SEC and the US since December of 2020. So they're the number 6 coin, which again, I think is quite remarkable because they've been taken off of all trading platforms in the US since December 2020, except one. So I guess you could trade it DeFi, but it's not the most accessible thing in the US. Not that the US
sure.
even has dominance over the crypto markets. Okay, so XRP is up 10.5% over 24 hours and up almost 28% over 7 days, which is quite a big move as well. That's over 7 days. That's a bigger move than Algorand. It's currently trading at 43 cents. So it's been in that long battle with the SEC, and it's looking like that could be winding down. They're speculating that maybe by the end of the calendar year 2022, they could have a ruling. But apparently the SEC and Ripple did agree on one thing. They both are asking the judge to make a ruling. And I think if this shows anything, there has been nothing that's actually happened, but people are trading on that news that there may be a resolution to this case soon. So anyway, I just want to mention that one because I'm interested in Ripple. I've been interested in this case for a long time, and it's notable.
Yeah. And I think we've probably talked about this before. Ripple was the very first coin that I ever purchased.
Us too.
I think I purchased it in November of 2020. And then, like, literally, no, let's see. Is that right? Yeah, maybe that's right. And then, literally a month later, they go into their lawsuit, and I get all these notifications like, hey, we're going to suspend trading. So it's like, I like panic got out of my position and um, lost, I was like 40% or something like that,
Mm,
in just like a few days
yeah.
trade. But it's continually has been one that has been on my watch list because there's just there's something about it that I'm always drawn to. I think there's something here, and you can get into the conspiracy side of things of, XRP is part of this plan to change the Swift to ACH system. You can or you can just look at it as what they did. Um, really, okay, so the reason the SEC pursued them in the first place is because they qualified them as a security
Mm-hmm.
and they were an unlicensed security. And now, one of the most recent articles I saw is that there are several governments that are looking into Luna Classic now and seeing if they can call it a security. Because if they can call it a security, then they have more grounds to go after some of these other people. But what's really fascinating to me is why some things that are built the same, function the same, get attacked and why some of them don't.
Mm.
I've seen a lot of people draw comparisons between XRP and Ethereum and say, hey, these function in somewhat similar ways. There's similarities, but how come Ethereum never seems to be the one that is talked about? Like, how come Ethereum doesn't have like all these people speculating about it and attacking it? And why is the government not doing anything about it? is it possible the government's behind Ethereum and controlling the way it's run? And, is that why Ethereum went through proof of stake instead of proof of work? Because now it's even more centralized with an uncapped limit of how much it can create, which sounds very much like the US dollar. There's a lot of things like that that are tossed around, and you can go down that road and say, well, that's why XRP is being attacked, is because they were doing it better and they weren't involved in it. Or, I mean, I've heard people take literally the exact opposite view of it and say that no, XRP actually was created by the Fed, and that's why the SEC is attacking it, because they want to keep it hidden and under all this confusion until they're ready to release it. So, I mean, you can really look at these things. You can be so polarized on it. Like, you can go one way or you can go completely the other way. Um, and it's hard because there really is no, I don't think, as the individual consumer, as a retail investor, that you're going to know the answer. Like, you just have to have relationship with Father and say, what do you want me to invest in? Where do you want me to put my focus? Because there's so much confusion and secrecy and privacy in all of these things that otherwise I think it's really hard to make a logical, clear decision.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I would agree. There are so many, I, as you're talking, I'm just like, there are so many conspiracy theories that we could go over today that could really send us down some rabbit holes. But I think what we need to do is just kind of back up a little bit and explain a bit of where we're coming from. So I'll be very transparent in this. I believe that the current financial system is broken, the one that the world has been working with for years, decades. I don't think it's working. And as you know, the US dollar has been king currency for quite a lot of that time.
Mm.
And in, I don't know that I would say in the research that I've done, but the vibe that I get from the sources in which I source, I love redundancy. The vibe that I get is that the US dollar is going to crash soon. And I'm not saying this is financial advice because I don't give financial advice. I'm saying this as something that I personally think might happen. I have a feeling, and feelings are not always facts, but I am just telling you, this is where I'm coming from. And so I think the US dollar is not always going to be king currency. And so the reason crypto is so interesting is because it offers real solutions for global currencies, for what could be coming next. I think this is the reason why you see so many countries, for instance, China's the most well known for having the central bank digital currencies, right? They have the digital yuan, but then they get to having the government issue that they can track every single transaction, every single yuan that is transacted between any people, right?
Mm.
And the US has been talking about stuff like this as well. I don't think that is the solution. I will be very honest. I think something that is decentralized is the solution. I don't think it's good for governments to be owned by a centralized organization because they control all the money. I don't think that it is free for people to not be able to trade with one another, like to not be able to just give Josh $5, which I'm not talking in dollars at this point, but 5 Satoshis, whatever,
Mm.
and not have it tracked or like scrutinized. I think that's the word that I'm really basing this on. Like, oh, I don't understand necessarily why every transaction needs to be able to be scrutinized and sorted through with a fine-tooth comb. You know what I mean? There are a lot of arguments out there for regulation that say, oh, but digital currencies and cryptocurrencies are used in nefarious transactions for terrorism and asking for ransom and all of these things. But let me just say this, and can we just be clear? The US dollar has been used for the same things and still is. You guys, it is no different in that aspect. You can't like criminalize the currency for being used by people who are doing bad things.
Right. I think this happens because cryptocurrency, even in just the name, implies secrecy and mystery, like cryptography, like the art of secrecy, kind of.
And coding something else.
Yeah, and that's, I think, because that implies that people take the approach of, oh, I don't understand this. It's secret. It's mysterious. What is cryptocurrency? And then you're able to really put that narrative on there of, well, it's used for nefarious purposes. It's used for criminal activities, and but yet watch any Netflix series about like
drug trafficking
and crime, and what does everybody have? Big bags of cash. Like, and why? Because big bags of cash are hard to trace. And so does I think this is where you run into this conversation of, do you want to live in a society where it's possible that criminal things go unnoticed because there is no accountability? Like, that's possible if we live in a purely cash society. I would argue that that's one of the reasons that our society has pushed credit cards and checks, is because it got us more away from a cash society to a society where everything is tracked. I mean, every purchase you make online, every purchase you make with a credit card, all that information is tracked and is gathered and is used to build a database of, what does Josh purchase? Where does he go? Like, what are his patterns? All that information is used to build that database. And so when people bring the argument of, well, I don't want cryptocurrency because it does track every movement, I would argue that your currency already does a great job of that. What you are currently using, what you are currently using already does a great job of building a profile on where you go and what you buy and who you are. And so you have this conversation of, do I want to live in a society where it's possible that things go unnoticed? And I would argue yes, for the same reason that I would argue that free speech should include hate speech, is because if you start to regulate in one area, whoever is regulating, as those people change, the ball is just going to get shifted one direction or the other direction on what's being regulated, what's being censored. If you start censoring free speech because you don't like someone's political opinion, then in a few years, when the political opinion changes, then what is being censored will change. If you start censoring how your finances are used because it's possible that it's used for criminal activities, then as things change, then your finances are being restricted, because maybe a particular business supported something, and now you can't use your finances there because it doesn't align with the narrative that's being written. And so I would argue in both cases, I would rather live in a society that has free speech with the potential of there being hate speech, and I would rather live in a society where finances are free to be used, even if that means there's a potential that they're used for illicit activities. because I think freedom to operate as a person is significant and is something worth standing up for.
Mm, I would agree. And I think we've seen even just this year, maybe it was last year. Time kind of becomes a bit fluid sometimes for me, but um you see some of those lines being crossed, like free speech being challenged by locking up one's financials or ability to use any kind of physical value, currency, fiat, right? We saw it happen in Canada. And whether you agree or not with people protesting, is it actually a reasonable thing to take away their ability to purchase even just a bottle of water because you don't agree with what they're saying? If we truly live in a free society, and in the US at least, we've been told that we're allowed free speech. But when you start subjectively limiting that, you start making it all based on opinion, right? If you can have an objective rule that is free speech and then a period at the end of that, right? Free speech, then it doesn't come down to one person's judgment or another, because every person, regardless of how well trained, still has a filter that they're looking at things through. I have a filter of Kim that I look at things through. No matter how much I try to back up and be objective, there's still going to be some remnant of who I am and how I see things. And I think that's where you get into really concerning subjects in society, when you start looking subjectively at some of these big rules like free speech, or even just being able to pay your friend $5, or $5 for the McDonald's they just bought you or something.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, doesn't need to be scrutinized at a level so that somebody else can judge whether that was worthy of you being able to spend your words or your whatever value you're holding.
Yeah, I think that really is the conversation, is like, we were, one of the other things we were talking about before we started recording was how sometimes we get desensitized to what's going on in society because everywhere we look is opportunity to see corruption or to see hopeless situations or seemingly hopeless situations. And so we kind of get desensitized to it because we're constantly listening to, well, this happened and this happened and this happened and this happened. And it's like, man, like, I can't do anything about that. So I'm just going to shut that down because, like, it's overwhelming. And I totally agree. I've totally been there, probably in some degree am there now. But I think it's as challenging as it is, it's something you have to look at, because if you don't look at it, you're never going to look for a solution. And I think as believers and as mystics who claim that we have a personal relationship with the Creator, like, that's our role in life, is to bring solutions to these situations. But if you don't know that the situation is crumbling, you're not going to look for a solution. You're just content with what's there.
It's a really good point. And I honestly, I want to say this too, because we're talking about these different freedoms and looking at things objectively, right? And I also think we have personal responsibility to act with integrity. And so when I'm upset about not being able to say things, it's not because I have hate speech coming out of my mouth. That's not what it is. It is about the ability to be able to speak freely when that is a supposed right here, or the ability to be able to transact freely. Not because I'm not running drugs. I don't like, there's no arms dealing. There's no terrorism. There's none of that crazy stuff going on in my life, but I still want to be able to freely trade from peer to peer, right? From person to person, without having to have every transaction scrutinized. And I know that some people are going to want to be listening to this and argue with me and say, oh, but they're only scrutinizing anything that's $600 or more. Well, at what point does it become $30 or more or whatever? You know what I mean? Like, why does it have to be within some context for it to then be wrong? Why not just allow the freedom?
I mean,
You know what I
even
mean?
the
And then,
$600 is relatively new. I
right,
mean, it's only a few years old that even that restriction was put on.
right. Well, and then allow self-governance. We do all have individual responsibility to society based on what are morals and values in your own life, right? And I'm not against, like, for instance, I prefer lower taxes. I prefer that. I am not against giving to people who are in need. But the difference is being told you have to, or having it come out of being compelled within your own being. You know what I mean? There's a difference in position, or like where your heart is in that. Right?
Well, and it's taking the I'm trying to find a good way to word this. Like, it's taking the responsibility off of you and putting it on someone else, which is uh, I would argue is a is choosing to live in immaturity. Um, just because you're saying, "Hey, I don't want the responsibility to take care of the widows and the orphans or the roads or educating kids. Like, I don't want that. So I'm going to push that responsibility onto somebody else. So I'm going to pay taxes and say that now my government has that responsibility. But it's an immature way of looking at things, because really you're giving the responsibility for shaping your nation, for shaping your culture, for shaping your future to somebody else who may or may not have your best interest at heart. And even, like, you can take all the conspiracy out of politics.
Mm.
If you give somebody total control over your future, that is that's not a position I want to put myself in. But that's what we do constantly by shifting responsibility. And it would change the complete culture. Like, if everybody took their personal responsibility back and educated their children and took care of the roads outside of their house and worked on and participated in producing the food that they eat, it would totally change the way society looks,
Mm.
because your priorities would have to shift. Your priority would have to shift from being a producer, from being a consumer, to, like, actually having to look at what's going on around you. And that so it would cause a huge shift in our culture, and I don't know that that's going to happen overnight, but I would rather see people start taking responsibility back before it's done um out of the collapse of something.
Mm. Yeah. Like, not in an emergency situation,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. That's interesting. This went a
Yeah.
completely different direction than I was expecting. Oh,
Most of our conversations do that.
oh, it's true. It's true. Okay. Well, thanks for joining us today, guys. We will see you back on Monday for Mystic Monday. I'm kind of excited to see what we talk about then, too.
Yeah.
Okay. Have a great weekend.
Thank you for listening. Join us every Monday and Thursday as we discuss trading on earth as it is in heaven. If you want to connect further, follow us on social media at market.mystics for Instagram and TikTok, and search for Market Mystics on YouTube and Facebook. If you still need more, follow the link on Facebook to book a coaching appointment. Until next time, see ya.